Well, we're back in the garage and it is time to start building out the gauges, seeing what we can get working, seeing if I can get the factory gauge cluster working again. That would be sweet. I do have aftermarket gauges that gives me the important information, oil pressure, temperature, voltage, but it would be nice to have the factory stuff working since I'm all in there. We're also going to be going through the last of the wiring in the car, identifying the LS swapped wiring for the new computer and all of that stuff, and then we'll probably get under the hood, start pulling out the headlight wiring and all of that stuff. So lots to do. Let's get into it. If you're new to this channel, this is just a quick update of what's going on, a little recap. This is a 1964 Chevelle Supersport convertible. It's a real Supersport. It's been LS swapped with an LSX 454, a 4L80 transmission, and a Ford 9-inch. It's running on UMI suspension all the way around. It's been dropped a little bit. Corners like a dream. It's got Wilwood Hydro Boost. And I just finished building this cool air box. Check out my shorts playlist. You can see the full build of this. That was pretty cool. But right now we're doing an air conditioning install, which has led to a full wiring of the car because it was a total disaster. That's the update. Oh yeah, we're also doing the engine on a Ferrari, but we'll get back to that. So let's get into these gauges. And I wanted to talk real quick about removal of this dash panel and the cluster. You see that I taped this off. I didn't really talk about this yesterday when I was doing it, but you see that I taped off around the dash. If you're taking this out, I highly recommend you doing that. Tape off around the dash to protect the paint. I've taken it out before and I did scratch the paint. So that's something you definitely want to do. One thing I really like about this kit, as I alluded before, is that it's got once you wire up all the gauges, there's a connector on the back. You can wire up the gauges separately, keep the entire cluster separate, and then it just plugs into the harness with one plug. So you can do it all on the bench. And that's going to make life a lot easier because basically none of the gauges are serviceable. None of the light bulbs are replaceable. I mean, it can be done, but it's a freaking nightmare to get in behind this thing and try and replace a light bulb or, figure out what's wrong with one of the gauges or whatever it may be. So if the thing needs to come out in the future, it's going to be as easy as, taking off the steering wheel or just dropping the column a little bit and then taking out the screws, undoing one plug, and then the whole cluster comes out, and then whatever needs to be serviced is serviced. So that's just something I wanted to make a comment about. Now, with that said, got the factory clock out of the Chevelle and a little bit of oil. She's up and running. It was always kind of worked a little bit, but it would stop. Seems to be working now. Gonna go through these gauges, see what I can get working. Right now, it's continuing on. Pretty cool. Get this old Chevelle back up and running. A bit of the ghost in the machine here. This thing's not plugged into anything. There's the wires, but she's running. No electricity at all. Yeah. She wants to run so bad, she runs with no power. So it's a very interesting feature of this clock that when it winds down a little bit, a little electric servo pulls this little arm back. See if I can point to it. This little arm right here is pulled back, and then it clicks along, spins the hands, And then when it winds down, an electric motor pulls that back, and then it just clicks along and clicks along, even without the electricity. So it takes almost no electricity at all. So it's not an electric motor that's running the clock. It's actually an analog clock with an electric winder. So as you see, this little thing, the gap is closing right here. And as soon as that gap closes, it makes an electrical contact, and then it pulls that piece back down and rewinds the clock. So there's no electric motor winding this clock. Once it gets and makes contact, you'll hear a click. And now there's a spring right here. This copper spring right there is the tension that's pulling that back. So it only uses electricity for a brief second to pop that thing back over, and now the spring is closing it again. So it's not an electric motor running, keeping this thing going. Very, very interesting. And it's running perfect. So I took the tiniest piece of emery cloth right there and sanded these contacts. They're literally like points, distributor points, and put a little touch of dielectric grease on there because I still found that the clock was stopping. So the clock is fine. It's actually the battery charger that I'm using is not resetting. It's not keeping the power on. It's not sensing a battery connected, so the power is not continuing to the clock. But I do believe that the clock is working. We're going to see when this runs down if it's going to keep running. All right, let's see if it rewinds itself, if it's getting electricity. Yep, working as it should. I'm going to leave it on tonight and see if it keeps running. So the plan now is to go through these gauges, clean everything, and test what I can. I'm going to try and hook up the gauges as best as I can, see if I can get these working. If I can't, then I can't. But I think that I know that my gas gauge does work. I'm going to try and get the voltmeter working. I can test that at least. Oil pressure, there is a fitting. I don't see why it wouldn't work. I can't really test it, but I do have a line. I'm going to go to an electric gauge for the center console off of the engine, but I do have a oil pressure feed line, and I'm going to try and run that into the back of the gauge and get this gauge working. I'd like to have all the gauges working, at least for redundancy, and because I like to have everything working. But we're gonna take this apart, clean it so we don't have any dirt and dust inside. And I'm also gonna see if I can switch these lights inside over to LEDs because, man, they just suck. To be completely honest with you, they're not bright enough. I cannot see. Yeah, it just needs to be dusted a little bit. Remember which is top. Let me put a little mark there. There's no marking on the gauges at all, so just put a little arrow pointing up. Remind me which way is up. So we'll take those gauges out. Boy, you can really see these are true analog, man. They do make gauge plastics with all the information on it. I may look into purchasing one. They're super cheap. Just so everything's bright and clear. These are so-so. I think this is a new speedometer because it says 13,170. I got the car at, I think, 10,000. I can't imagine that the whole car would have 110,000 on it. So I think this is it looks brand new. This thing looks way nicer than the rest of the stuff. So you can get clusters from Digital Dakota, obviously, and I would love to have that, but you know, it's like a $2,000 upgrade, and that may come down the line. That was another reason I liked this wiring company, because they offer, you know, the setup so you can run digital gauges in this wiring system. Not exactly sure how they do it. We'll figure that out when the time comes. We'll figure that out. I've had this gauge cluster out in the past, and I dreaded having to do it again just because it's such a nightmare. But I've never had it this far out of, I've never took it out of the dash. All right, let's find a safe place for this. I'll put it right there for right now. So let's take these off, bend these tabs out of the way. All right, so yeah, that is definitely the original. It's got scratches in it and it's pretty filthy. So we're going to clean this whole thing. And I think we're going to go get a new one of these. So let's do that. One thing I want to try to address, and something that I've never liked, is that down here there are these grommets with all these wires coming out. That one right there is wide open. These things are open to the outside. And if I'm ever driving in weather, those things are going to let a ton of water through. So I'm thinking about just completely blocking them there and maybe bringing in the wiring somewhere else. I'm going to work on that because that is just terrible. From here, the next step is to cut a larger hole in the firewall to accept the new fuse panel and the wiring for the bulkhead. Let's get into that. Hey, if you like this content, please consider subscribing and maybe picking up a t-shirt. Link in the description below. Thanks. Now the American Auto-Wire kit comes with this template, and this is what I'm going to use to cut the hole in the firewall. This is, it says it's self-adhesive, so we're going to cut that out, stick it to the firewall, trace it, cut it, and then see if we can get the wire, start putting wire into the car and moving forward. Okay, so I've got the template now in place. Now, per the instructions, they wanted this edge against this edge. But the problem is I have a bulkhead opening right here that takes a grommet, and if this is over on this side, it's going to be into that. And then I can't use the grommet to seal this hole, and I end up with a big hole. So I'm just going to move this over a little bit. There is a ridge right here that drops off, but I have enough material here to seal it up, I believe. And then we'll be drilling those holes out. And then we're going to get out our little Ingersoll Rand saw that we use to cut in the vents. And we're going to cut that hole out right there. And then we can start getting some wiring into this car. Okay, there it is. Firewall cut, fuse panel installed. My saw is really good, but my air compressor sucks, so that made that difficult. But all in all, it's in, and it's in place and buttoned down. And you can see it on the engine side. We've got the new bulkhead in place. It's all sealed. Whew. All right, that was a big one. Well, that's going to do it for this video. In the next video, we're going to get into the headlight wiring, get under the hood, figure out what wires we need and what we don't need for the engine compartment, and we're probably going to get that air box out for the heater. Stick around. We're still tearing stuff out of this car, but I promise we're going to start putting it back together pretty soon. Thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe. Peace.